All right, guys. Let's go ahead and do another lesson on transformations here. We did transformations in lesson 3.2. I'm going to call this part 2. And what it is I'm just going to be giving you guys some different types of questions that will be asked. So there's 3 types here. I'm going to give you 2 functions, equations, and then based on those you're going to describe the transformations. That's kind of old. We've already done that, but we'll look at that again just to refresh our minds. And then after that, I'm going to give you a function and then a description of some transformations. And from that, you're going to write a new equation. That'll look a little less familiar, but a little more. And then finally, I'm going to give you something a little completely new where I give you the graph of 2 different functions. And you have to find an equation that accurately describes the relationship between them. In other words, how they are transformations of each other. Okay? So let's go ahead and get started with our first one. So let's go ahead and begin. I'm going to do 4 problems. These are all going to be multiple choice. I'm just trying to get them to look a little bit more like what you can expect to see on your exam that will be coming up in this chapter. And I've also got these 2 charts over here for you, which were in Unit 3.2 as well, but I've reposted them here for you. All right, so here's our first one. It says, describe the transformations necessary to transform the graph of f into g. So here's f. That's my original function there. And here's g. Now, really the part that is the same here is that this guy's an x squared, and this guy has an x squared. But as you can see, there's a couple of new things here. The new things that g has is this 1/3, and it also has this -3 on it. And both of those, that yellow part and that green part, those are new things. Those are transformations of f. So let's see if we can identify what they are. Well, the yellow one, let's start with that, the 1/3. I've got a 1/3 and it's multiplying the x squared. Okay. Now, another thing I want to pay attention to actually before I begin noticing that is, are these changes, are they inside the parentheses or outside the parentheses? Well, there's no parentheses at all, right? And so in this case, they're outside the parentheses. And whenever you're outside the parentheses, those are vertical transformations. So I'm only going to be using this chart for this particular problem. If you have stuff that's happening inside the parentheses, then we'll use this one down here. But for this problem, they're only outside, so we're only going to be looking up here. So now let's go back to that first part that I was talking about, that 1/3. So I'm multiplying my x squared by a number. Now, which one of these transformations here show us multiplying our function by a number? Well, that's going to be one of these 2 right here. Okay, both of this, here's my function being multiplied by a, and here's my function being multiplied by a. But there's a difference between these 2 situations. In this one, the absolute value of a is greater than 1, and on this one, the absolute value of a is less than 1. So by absolute value, what they mean is just ignore the sign of the number. So it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. Just look at the number itself, 1/3. Now, is 1/3 greater than 1 or is it less than 1? Well, it's less than 1. So since it's less than 1, we have a vertical compression. Okay, so it's a vertical compression. So let's look in here and see what we can find. I see compression vertical here. I don't see any other ones there that do that. So I already know the answer's got to be A. But I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of it because there's more there, but it doesn't really matter. We already know the answer's this one. Let's see. The next part is the green one here. So for the green one, my x squared is being subtracted by 3. So which of these transformations over here show my function being subtracted? Well, that would be this one right here. There's my function being subtracted by a number, and that's a vertical translation downwards. So as you can see here, we have a vertical translation downwards. So the answer will be A. So we had to do 3 things. The first thing we had to do was pick our chart. And to do that, we have to decide, are the numbers that they're giving us, are they outside parentheses or inside? If they're outside the parentheses, we're going to use the vertical chart. If they're inside the parentheses, those are going to be horizontal ones, so we'll use the horizontal chart. The next thing we have to do is we have to find out which transformations they are from the chart. And that's pretty much it. I mean, after that, you should be able to identify the answer. So now be aware that sometimes you'll have changes inside parentheses and outside parentheses, in which case you'll be using both charts, but you have to be aware of which one is which. Let's take a look at a second example. All right, so for number 2, let's see here. The original function is just the absolute value of x, okay? So the absolute value of x, that's the same, and that's the same. Those two absolute value bars in the x, that's original. We have 2 new things, though. I've got a -3 here on the inside of the brackets, and then I have a +3 here on the outside of the brackets. So let's see if we can identify what these are. So the first thing we need to do is we need to decide what chart do we use. All right. Well, this -3 here, it's inside the absolute value bars. So that's kind of like parentheses. So in this case, we do have a -3 inside the parentheses. So since we're inside the parentheses, we're going to look at the horizontal chart. And I'm going to find which one of these has number being subtracted from x inside the parentheses. And that would be this one right here. And therefore, we have a translation to the right. So I can come up here and I can look for all my options where I've got a translation to the right. It seems like I have one right here. That's the wrong color. Let me do yellow though. So I've got one here and I've got one here. So already I know the answer has to be A or C because both of those correspond to this yellow thing here, which is a translation to the right. Now let's do the orange one. The orange one here, this 3 is being a number added outside the parentheses. So since I'm outside the parentheses, then that is a vertical change. And so I'm going to be looking at this chart. So in this chart up here, which one of these has a number being added outside the parentheses? And that would be this guy right here. And therefore, it's a translation up. So which one of these has a translation up? Well, that would be this guy. And therefore, we have our answer. Once again, the answer is A. So to get from F to G, that's basically a translation to the right and a translation up. Take a look at yet another problem, number 3. All right, so my original function is this square root guy right here, and here he is down here. But we do have a couple of changes. I've got this 1/3 here. I've also got this +1. Use a different color for that. That's another difference there, is the +1. And we actually have another difference here. I've got a little negative there in the front. And remember, those negatives are a different transformation than the 1/3 that it's with. We're so used to putting the sign with the number and thinking, oh, that's just a number, -1/3. Well, when you do transformations, we think of the 1/3 and the negative separately, okay? So the green part's the original part, and we don't care about that. But the pink, yellow, and purple, those are the new parts. So let's begin. So first of all, I don't see any transformations inside the parentheses. In this case, inside the parentheses would mean inside the square root, and there is no changes happening inside the radical there. So we're not going to be looking at this chart at all for this particular problem. Everything's outside the brackets, or square root, I mean. So everything's vertical. So let's go ahead and start off with this pink one here first. That's a negative in front, and that would be this guy, which means we have a vertical reflection happening. Now, this thing is going to say it a little bit differently than vertical reflection. It's going to say a vertical reflection means that it's being flipped across the x-axis. So which one of these says that it's being reflected or flipped across the x-axis? Well, I see that right here, and I also see it right here. So there's 2 options here that have reflections in the x-axis. So far, it's either A or B. Let's go ahead and take a look at the other one now. We've got the 1/3. So I'm multiplying by a number that is less than 1. 1/3 is less than 1. So that would be this one here. I'm multiplying it by a number that is less than 1. And that's a vertical compression. And so I see that here. I don't see a vertical compression here. I see a horizontal compression, but we don't have any horizontals. It's all vertical. So there it is. We already know the answer has to be A, but just to continue the process here, we do have our +1, and that would be this guy, which is a translation up. So there's that. So all three of those transformations are there. So the answer, once again, will be A. I don't know why they're all A. That's kind of weird. Hopefully that doesn't keep happening, but we'll see. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at number 4. All right, so this will be the last one I go over here. The rest, I'm going to let you guys do 4. After these problems, I'm going to let you guys do numbers 5 through 8, and you can check your answers here once you're done. So let's begin. For this one, the function is x squared. So here's my x and here's my square. Those are original pieces. And now we want to look at our transformations. So things that are new. So I've got the minus there on the outside, and then I have the +3 on the inside. Those are my new pieces. So, and both of those new things are transformations. So let's begin. So first of all, that negative, is that inside or outside the parentheses? Well, hopefully you guys can see that that is outside the parentheses. And since it's outside the parentheses, I'm using the wrong color there. What color is that? Trying to get the right color back. There it is. Since it's outside the parentheses, that's vertical. So we're going to look up here at this chart. We're going to ask ourselves, where is there a negative being on the outside of the function? And that's this guy right here. So we have a vertical reflection, which means we're flipping the graph across the x-axis. So I see that here, and I see that here, and I also see that here. So that didn't narrow it down for me very much. I have a few other things I need to look at then. So now we want to look at the next one, the +3. Now notice that's inside the parentheses. So I'm going to be looking at my horizontal chart for that one. And it looks like I'm adding a number to the x, so that would be this guy here. So we have a translation to the left. I see that here, and that's it. So the answer on that one must be B. Okay, so decide which chart you're looking at, identify the transformation, and go for it. All right, so I'm going to bring up 4 for you guys to work on. All right, there you go. So go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can identify what the correct choice is for 5 through 8. And when you unpause the video, I will have the answers displayed for you. All right, so there you go. We have option A for number 5. For number 6, we have option C. For number 7, we have option A. And for number 8, we have option A. All right, let's move on to our next type of questions. All right, so for these types of problems, I'm going to give you a function, and then I'm going to give you some transformations. And if you applied these transformations to this function, the question is, which of these would it be? So it's kind of like the opposite of the last problem. On the last problem, I gave you the 2 functions and asked you to describe them. On this one, I give you the description and ask you to find the function. So it's just really the same thing, but just being asked backwards, so you guys can kind of get flexible with seeing the question from different angles. All right, so let's begin here. So the first thing is we have f of x, and it's being reflected across the y-axis. So where's that at in our chart? I see that it's being reflected or flipped across the y-axis here. So that would be a horizontal reflection, which means that I need a negative to be right in front of my x. Now, which of these options has a negative right in front of the x? Well, boom, boom, and boom. There's 3 of them there. There's one that does not have a negative right in front of the x, and that's this guy. I know there's a negative here, but that's outside the brackets, and with these ones, it's inside. So we know B can't be it. So let's go ahead and do the next one now. The next one is translation to the left 2 units. So I see translation left is right here. So that means I should have a number being added to my x. I see that happening here and here. So now I can get rid of this guy because that one doesn't have a number being added to x, it's being subtracted. All right, and we have one more to look at here. Let's try this guy. Being translated down. I see translation down here, and that means I should have a number being subtracted outside the parentheses. Now, this is kind of tricky. there are two, these are both being subtracted, but notice the numbers. This one's -3 and this one's -2. Okay, now according to my description up here, we're translating down 3 units, so it's the one with the 3 on it. So in this case, the answer would be A. Gosh, there's an awful lot of A's on here. That's kind of irritating. Oh well, we'll bear with it. Let's go ahead and take a look at number 10, just to get to some more practice here. So my function is f of x equals x squared. The first thing I want to look for is I want to look for a reflection across the x-axis, and I see that right here, which is where you have a negative outside the parentheses. So this is an insider, so that's not it. This is an outsider, but this is an insider. So we have two ones with where there's a negative being multiplied by the x inside the parentheses. We're going to get rid of those. So those are no good. But I have two options here where I've got negatives on the outside of the parentheses, and that's going to be this guy here and this guy here. So right now I know the answer is either A or D. Let's go ahead and take a look at another one here. Translation down 2 units. Translation down is right here, and that means we have a number being subtracted from our function on the outside. That would be this guy right here. And so, well, surprise, surprise. It's another A option there. All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at 11. Gosh, I wonder if the answer is A. I don't know. Let's see. So here's my function. We are expanding it horizontally by a factor of 3. Now, when they say expand, that means stretch. Okay, so expanding horizontally or stretching horizontally by a factor of 3. So here is horizontal stretching or expanding right here. They're using a different word. It's a synonym, but stretch and expand mean the same thing. Now, in that case, you should have a number being multiplied by your x that's less than 1. So which one of these has our x being multiplied by a number less than 1? Well, there's really only one option here, and it's this guy. This one doesn't have anything multiplying the x, and neither do these. These have negatives in front of them, but remember, that's a separate transformation. We're just looking at numbers right now. And so that's the only one. So that has to be the answer. But just to complete the process, we'll look at the other one anyway. So a reflection across the x-axis. There's my reflection across the x-axis. So I should have a negative outside the parentheses, and sure enough, there it is. So our answer is B. Hey, what do you know? It's not A this time. Nice. All right, let's move on to number 12. This will be the last one I do with you guys, and I'll let you guys practice a couple of these. So for this one, we want to look for a compression horizontally. A compression horizontally, and that's this guy. So in that case, we should have a number multiplying our x that's greater than 1. So that would be this guy here. And once again, that's really the only option. Here, there's a number multiplying that's greater than 1, but it's not multiplying the x. It's multiplying the square root. It's outside the parentheses. We want one that's inside the brackets, or the square root in this case. So the only option is B. But once again, we'll just keep going over the rest of it just to practice. So translating to the right, translating to the right. So I should have minusing a number inside the parentheses, and sure enough, there it is. So the answer on that one is B. All right, so now I'm going to let you guys practice a couple of these. So go ahead and pause the video here and see if you guys can pick out the correct answer choice for numbers 13 through 16. And when you unpause it, you will see the answers. So for this one, number 13, you should have chosen answer C. For 14, the answer is B. For 15, the answer is A. And for 16, the answer is C. We'll do the stars next. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our last type of question here. And on these types of questions, I'm going to give you two graphs. And basically going to ask you which one of these transformation descriptions show us what we would have to do to the blue line to get the green line. So let's go ahead and read these instructions here, because these instructions are kind of strange, and so I'm going to give you a way to interpret those so it'll make it a little bit easier. but let's read what it says. The function f is the solid line, or in other words, the blue line, and the function g is the dashed line, the green one here. The question says, identify which equation describes the relationship between f and g. So which one of these transformation descriptions tells us what we would have to do to the blue line to get the green line? So that's what I think we should add to our notes here. So put that here. Let's write that. What would we have to do to the blue line, or the solid line, to get the green line, or the dashed line, in other words? Now, before we start answering that question, I want to take a little side trip here for a minute and talk about stretches and compressions. So, suppose I have this little U shape up here. I'm going to ask a question. How can we make it look skinnier? And another question I can ask is, how can we make it look fatter? Okay. Well, the tricky part to this is that there's two ways that both of those things can happen. So one way I can make this U shape look skinnier is by stretching it vertically. That makes it look really skinny. Okay, so one way I can make it look skinnier is with a vertical stretch. And on our chart, that means that you multiply your function by a number, and that number is greater than 1. Okay? Now, but there's another way that we can make the shape look stretched. Let me show you that. Let me put it back to normal here really quick. So this is what it looked like. Another way you can make it look skinny is, instead of stretching it vertically, you can squish it horizontally. That also makes it look skinny. So vertical stretches or compressions horizontally will also make it look skinnier. Now, a horizontal compression is where you multiply a number inside the brackets where that number is greater than 1. Okay? So there are two ways that you can make a graph look skinnier, by either vertically stretching it or horizontally compressing it. Now, the opposite is true whenever you're trying to make the thing look fatter. So let's put it back to normal here. So how can we make it look fatter? Well, one way I can make it look fatter is by stretching it horizontally. That's whenever you are multiplying a number inside the parentheses, and that number is less than 1. Okay. Another way that we can make it look fatter is, if starting from here, is if you were to smash it vertically or compress it vertically. And that's where you are multiplying a number by the outside, and that number is less than 1. So here's kind of a nice little way to remember this. In order to make it look skinny, you're multiplying by a number that's greater than 1, whether it's outside or inside. In order to make it look fatter, you're multiplying by a number that is less than 1, whether it's inside or outside. So keep that in mind as we go ahead and do these next few problems. All right, so back to this question here. All right, I changed the question, like that last one. It presents some issues. So, but anyway, let's look at this. We're reinterpreting the instructions as, what would you have to do the blue line to get the green line? Okay, so that's how we're going to be interpreting that. All right, so what would we have to do to it? Well, it looks to me like the green line has been shifted upwards 1 unit. It's been shifted upwards 1 unit. Another word for shift is translate. Okay, but that's not quite enough. It also looks like this green line's a little bit skinnier to me than the blue line. And in order to get a graph to look skinny, we said earlier that that means it has to be either, the blue line would have to be compressed horizontally, or it could be stretched vertically. Both of those things will make it look skinnier. So let's go ahead and write that down. All right, so we're looking for these two transformations, and we want to know which one of these options down here show us a shift or translation up, as well as a horizontal compression or vertical stretch. So let's see if we can find it here. Let's start with the shift and translate up. That's this guy. So that's where we are going to be adding a number outside of the parentheses. And I really only see one option that does that. So the answer has to be D. But just to continue the rest of the problem anyway, we said that it looks skinnier, which means that it would have to be either horizontally compressed or vertically stretched. So here's a vertical stretch, and here's a horizontal compression. Either way, whether the number's outside the parentheses or inside the parentheses, we should be multiplying by a number greater than 1. And in this case, sure enough, we are multiplying by a number greater than 1 outside the parentheses. So in that case, it would actually be the vertical stretch. All right? So the answer to this one would be D. Let's go ahead and try another one here. All right. So what would I have to do to this blue line to get this green line? Well, for one, it's been shifted up again. So let's go ahead and put that. But it looks like it's also been made a lot fatter. And as we talked about earlier, if you want to make a graph fatter, there's two ways you could do it. You could either stretch it horizontally, or you can squish it vertically. But either way, both of those options will make it look fatter. So let's go ahead and put that on there. And now we're ready to go ahead and see if we can find out which one it is. So let's start off with the shift or translation up. That's this guy up here. And as you can see, we're adding a number outside of the parentheses, and I only see one option again, so it's right there. But as you can see, we still have to consider this just for practice here, but we already know the answer is D. If we have a stretch horizontal, stretch horizontal, or a vertical compression, either way, we're multiplying inside or outside the parentheses by a number that's less than 1. And sure enough, that is what's happening here. So the answer is D. Let's go ahead and take a look at another question. Number 19. Looks fat again. So once again, we're going to be stretching horizontal or compressing vertically. And it also looks like it's been flipped upside down to me, which means that that's a vertical reflection. Whenever it looks like it's been flipped upside down, that's a vertical reflection. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can find our transformations. Stretching it horizontally or compressing it vertically. Either way, we're multiplying by a number inside or outside the parentheses by a number that's less than 1. So here's where I'm multiplying by a number inside the parentheses by a number less than 1. Here's another one like that. And here's another one where I'm multiplying by a number less than 1 outside the parentheses. So all three of these are possibilities. So let's go ahead and move on to our next option here now, the flipping upside down or the vertical reflection. That would be this guy. That's where you have a negative outside the parentheses. And so for this one, we have two options, it looks like. It could be either option C or D. And without getting too specific, there's really no way we can tell. This is what I would call an ambiguous question because there's two possibilities to the answer. I won't give you one like this on the test where there's two possibilities, so don't worry about it. There's ways to narrow it down more, but that goes beyond what I really care about for now. But for now, C or D are both good answers for this because they would both make the graph look fatter and they would both have it be flipped upside down. On this one, I would say either C or D is a good answer. But don't worry, I'll avoid those on your test so that you don't get confused by the fact that there's more than one possibility. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at number 20, and then I'm going to let you guys practice some of these. So here we go. What would you have to do to the blue line to get it to look like the green line? Well, it doesn't look like it's been made fatter, but it does look like it's been flipped upside down, which we know is a vertical reflection. And it also looks like it's been shifted to the left a little bit. It's been shifted this way a little bit. So that would be a translation to the left. All right, so let's begin looking for our options then. So vertical reflection, that's where we have a negative on the outside. Two options there. And we also want to look for a translation or a shift to the left. That would be this guy. And that's where you're adding a number inside the parentheses. So that's this guy. So option C is the clear answer on that one. All right. So we're going to go ahead and let you guys practice a couple of these now. So go ahead and pause the video here and give these problems a try. See how you do with them. And when you unpause the video, I will have the answers available for you. All right, so you guys can see the answers here: C, D, D, A. All right, and that'll do it for our lesson today, and we will see you guys in class.